Hey guys, welcome back to Music is My Mantra. I'm Courtney McKenna. Today we're going to explore a little bit of the science and the nerdy side of sound and music and vibration and healing. With that, I'll talk a little bit about the nature of sound, a little bit of a historical context of how sound has always been used in healing practices. I'll talk about some studies that I find that are pretty exciting that are new as of the 90s that are really impacting the way that people are thinking about vibration and healing in music and sound. This is going to be a little bit out of my comfort zone. I'm going to be talking about scientific method studies, things that I'm definitely not an expert on, but I've just found really interesting since I started studying more about music. I've always had this interest in healing and wellness. This episode is called Vibes. Vibes is shortened for vibrations. You might have heard that term floating around the atmosphere. Vibes, that place is good vibes, bad vibes, blah, blah, blah. It's not just a phrase, it comes from more of a scientific foundation. Everything on Earth is vibration. Sound as a vibration is a wave that is being carried through a medium. It could be a block of wood, a solid. That's where you get a guitar. It could be a drum. That's also a solid. It could be through water, or it could be through air. All of these vibrations are characterized by frequency and amplitude. If you think of frequency, it's the pitch of the sound. It could be really high up here, really low down here. And the amplitude, which is measured in amps, think of an amplifier or a speaker, for example, that is how loud the sound is. The different organs in our bodies have different frequencies that can resonate with sound on different wavelengths in different hertz. These different frequencies in our bodies potentially can change when it's encountered with another sound. Resonance is the idea that one sound wave can influence another one. If you're singing and playing the piano and your voice isn't quite matching the key of the piano, for example, you have these two wavelengths and they can be really close, but if they're off pitch at all, then the resonance, you can hear it. It's like it creates another wave that's not the same tone. It's not the same pitch. What we like to do is tune our voices. We train our ear to match pitch in different frequencies. But there is a specific type of resonance called entrainment, where entrainment is the idea that a certain frequency can influence another frequency. These are studies that sort of prove the benefits of a sound bath, for example, because listening to these soothing sounds and that sort of thing can have a positive soothing impact on our body or our nervous system. There's many different studies that are continually being researched, especially, like I said, since the 1990s on this sound healing, different modalities. More recent studies have shown that very low frequencies can be used for pain management. There's been studies where music is played during a surgery. The recovery time is much faster. There's studies that show that sound can help improve mobility because the body reacts in a way that our mind doesn't fully comprehend, but it's that idea of entrainment where the waves are actually moving energy through the body. Sound therapy has been explored for managing lots of different types of chronic pain, like fibromyalgia. There's been studies on dementia and music and how music can actually help to re-stimulate the mind, bring back memories, sort of awaken the soul, if you will. They don't call it that because that's not scientific, but obviously. There's also this idea of brainwave entrainment. We talked a little bit about the book Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which goes through the different brainwave levels. And once you get to this relaxed theta brainwave state, then you're more programmable to learn new things, to let go of old beliefs, and sort of reprogram your mind, which is pretty cool. There's also been studies of solfeggio frequencies such as 528 hertz and the effects it has on the body and the heart. There's this idea of binaural beats, two different pitches stimulating the brain from different sides to help you focus or relax. And different frequencies, different hertz can be effective for certain things, like focusing or like relaxing, getting to that theta brainwave state, helping the body to come into this relaxed, safe space, which helps to regulate your nervous system. That's just with the vibrations, the frequency of it. But then we also have this area of music that's tempo. The tempo or the rhythm has physiological effects on the body as well. It can also influence our brainwave activity or the entrainment of our heart rate. Some studies show hormonal regulation, stress reduction, and dopamine release. If you, for example, want to tap your foot along with the music, that is actually creating a vibration as well to sync your body up with the rhythm of the song that you're listening to. I haven't cited anyone yet because these are more commonly accepted ideas of sound healing. There's two different types of recognized sound healing areas. There's music therapy, which deals more with emotions and actually the writing components, the pieces, and melody, technical stuff that goes along with the song. And then there is sound healing, which is more of using the frequencies directed in the body. Think like Tibetan singing bowls, tuning forks, and that's actually going, physically over the body using the skill of entrapment to shift the frequencies in the body, which is so cool that that's a thing. If you've ever had a sound bath, maybe you've experienced this personally. Now, I am sort of more interested in where all of this new research was going because, like I said, in the 1990s, there was like a new rebirth of study and interest on music and sound and healing. You may have heard of Dr. Emoto and his studies on the effects of music on water. What he did was basically run different types of music like jazz, metal, country, classical, through water and watched it freeze. He created these ice crystals using the energetics of water on the ice. In some instances, there were beautiful crystalline patterns. Some of them were super chaotic and crazy. This study is not super widely accepted because the different variables that you need to have a study, it needs to be repeatable. It needs to have, standardization. Some say that it's subjective because you're just looking at crystals and what I find beautiful might be different from what you find beautiful. But the really important thing about this study is that if you look at like classical music compared to thrasher hardcore metal, the patterns looked very, very different. Our bodies are mostly made up of water. You can imagine what sound and the process that we know to be true of entrainment does to our body when we're listening to different types of music. If you want to listen to classical, there are studies out there that say that it can help your brain develop to remember things. I used to listen to classical music all the time when I was studying growing up because I heard that and I believed it, and it did. There's not words. It's like you're just feeling where the music comes together and there's this resonance and then a release. There's tension and then release, and I find it really soothing. Metal is something where I play guitar, so I have a big appreciation for it, and there are some bands that I've gotten into, but it's not something that I listen to all the time. It's pretty much like I have to be in sort of a rare mood to listen to that kind of music. But I always, I can appreciate a good guitar solo. I can appreciate how tight the drumming is, for example. Before the 90s, of course, before these studies started popping up, another really interesting thing that you'll find about music and healing and that space in between is this idea of 440, the frequency of 440. The note 440 hertz is A above middle C. This is the note that all orchestras tune to. If you ever go to see a live orchestra, they'll all tune to this note. All Western instruments are all already pre-tuned to 440. Now, before the 60s, this wasn't the case. There was not the internet. The Board of Standardization, or whatever the name of this agency was, that declared that 440 would be the standard across the globe. I couldn't find any research on why they chose that, except for maybe it was just more commonly accepted already. But the alternate tuning to 440 is 432. This is something that you'll find a lot of mathematical theory behind, because all of music is math. Music theory is all math and patterns. People believe that 432 is really where that A should be tuned to. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's so subtle. Like, can you even hear the difference? It's really hard to, I don't know if I would be able to tell the difference just right after each other, except for maybe, it's a little bit lower in pitch. But you can order singing bowls, Tibetan singing bowls, that are tuned to 440 or 432. This is because Tibetan singing bowls, this comes from the Indian Vedic tradition. The Vedas is the oldest philosophy book in the yogic tantric practice. I guess you could say it's kind of like the Bible, but it's a book of poems and rules or guides of how to live your life, the best yogic life that you can. And they believe that sound has a really big impact on that. There's actually what we call bij mantras, which came from that philosophy. These are what they call them seed mantras. They're sounds like lam, vam, ram, om. What's cool about these is that these seed mantras all correspond to a chakra in the body. And if you're not familiar with what a chakra is, there is an idea that comes from this Eastern philosophy that there are energy centers in the body, and there's 7 of them on the body. There's other beliefs that there's more below us and above us, but there's 7 main ones. Your root chakra, your sacral, your solar plexus, your heart, your throat, your third eye. Up here, the very last one is your crown chakra. Each bij mantra corresponds to a chakra, and each chakra has a different representation for a part of your life. For example, the root chakra is, think of like the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's safety, it's shelter, where it's like those primal needs, whereas our sacral is above the root chakra. It's sort of, for us women, it's where our wombs are, and that's the source of creation. Whereas the solar plexus, which is right in your gut area, between like your belly button and your heart, this is where all of your self-confidence is. Your heart is obviously love. Your throat is communication. The theory is that you can tune these chakras by saying these vowels and these bij mantras, these sounds. Lam. Some even believe that the notes correspond to the 7 chakras. There's 7 notes. Now, I couldn't find specific research on this, but it kind of makes sense. The part that doesn't so much is that in the world, there's lots of different musical systems, and our musical system, like solfege, 7 notes, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, those are more of a Western philosophy. If you go to India and you play an instrument there, they might not subscribe to 440 because they have other ways of tuning instruments, and they have different notes that are on different scales. What's cool is that we can apply these notes to the 7 chakra system, but I don't think traditionally that's really what was intended. But the mantra itself, the sound, the vowel shape, that's definitely very powerful. One thing that I take from my own practice in Buddhism when I lived in New York City was that they believed in this idea of cause and effect through sound. It's actually pretty practical if you think about it, because I'm using my body to create something new that then can kind of come back and retone through entrapment my cells on a very cellular level. It's partially intention, but I'm also creating through communication and through my lungs and through my throat. It's a cycle of using our own energy to sort of rebalance and reset, which I think is super cool. This idea, again, this is a very ancient thing that is still used today with sound healing, singing bowls, that sort of thing. Back to the 1990s, we had Dr. David Hawkins, who spent 20 years researched 250,000 people doing kinesiology, muscle testing on these people to get a read of the different frequencies of emotions. He created what he calls the map of consciousness. In his work, he found that higher frequencies were often more associated with joy, love, where neutrality is in the middle. Lower frequencies were these heavier emotions that we often think of when like we're sad or angry or frustrated. You can see his map of consciousness. It's pretty crazy. Like 250,000 people is, in my mind, a pretty big sample size. Again, I'm no expert. I don't think his study was peer reviewed or recreated, but it is an interesting concept. If we can study the frequencies of organs, then why not be able to understand the frequencies of emotions? Because then we can come back to this idea of entrapment. You can already feel a song when it's a happy melody and maybe you're having a sad day, and it can pull you out of that, or vice versa. Like if you're feeling really frustrated and you put on like a heavy rock song, it can be a release because you're just letting it go and you're feeling it. A lot of these newer concepts, I think, are going to be explained more over time. There are people who are studying the frequency of plants. This is another big thing. It's like the idea that the rose is the highest frequency flower out there. It makes sense, right? Like I love roses, and they smell delicious and they're beautiful, and I mean, I think all flowers are incredible, but they smell so good. Bruce Tainio was the one who has been studying plants. He's found that the rose is at 320 hertz. This idea of emotions having different frequencies, it's more of a theoretical concept because through muscle testing, they haven't figured out a way to study the brainwaves emotions yet, that I'm aware of anyway. But one thing I did find that was really interesting is that our energetic body, which is a real thing because this is how, if you ever have like a CAT scan or an MRI or something, the body, those machines are not actually touching you. You lay down in a bed and then they scan you, but they're reading the energy that comes off of your body. So in that sense, you could say that telepathy is real because our bodies have vibrations and auras that we can't necessarily see, but we might be able to feel. Like if you're talking with somebody and you get like a weird vibe, you get a weird feeling, you can feel it. It's the same thing with music. We turn on music when we want to feel a certain way. It's less often that you just play radio roulette and you end up with something random. You usually put on Spotify or Pandora because there's a specific person or a song that you want to listen to because you have the intention of wanting to feel a certain way. Maybe you really connect with the lyrics, but there's something about the actual physicality of sound interacting with the frequency of our own body and our own organs that makes us change. These were some of the interesting studies that I found that I've learned about over the years. I wanted to just dive into them a little bit for myself because I've seen these things shared on Instagram. Of course, I've done my yoga teacher training, so I know about the Vedas and I know a little bit about Bij mantra or seed mantras. I wanted to know like the validity of these things, right? Because I love the idea of daydreaming and imagining, and I do feel that there's just something very magical about music and the way that we can create it and the way that we can use it as a tool, or just, even just working with it, creating it at all, accepting it to help us relax and to regulate our nervous system. These are all things that music can do pretty incredibly. But like I said, I think on the first episode, I do think we are just scratching the surface. A lot of these studies, again, were in the 90s, and now I really feel like this, with the advancement of AI, like we're just on the surface of understanding a lot more about ourselves and how we can advance as a society. So I thought that these were kind of interesting to bring up, especially the 440 versus 432, because I feel like it's one of those debates where it could be real, it could not be real, but it makes sense to me that if everything is perfectly created in a Fibonacci sequence throughout the universe, 432 aligns with that. Shouldn't we be working with it as opposed to slightly off or against it? Just some ideas for thought. I hope that you found this episode interesting. I can't wait to have some more experienced guests on than myself to talk more about these things, the power of transformation. I think I covered the scientific stuff all right. I'll add some fun images and photos and stuff in for context. But yeah, I wanted to share when my grandpa was sick, he was diagnosed with dementia at the end of his life. I got to go and play music for him. He was never really a man of too many words towards me, but it was definitely special because I do feel like he kind of came back to life in those moments. It's just another example of how the power of music can enliven us. It's the frequencies, the molecular alignment, whatever you want to call it. The vibes are real. When the vibes are good, trust your gut, trust your solar plexus, trust that your body actually can feel good or bad, because it can feel whether something is safe or not. It can feel intention, the intention that somebody has for you, if they have one, for example. Our nervous system also reacts to our past experience. This is where things get tricky, is because sometimes we're taught to ignore how we feel because we're actually triggered by something that happened to us a long time ago. And that's not actually the reality of what's happening right here, right now. We get to learn between reality and the discernment of what's real and what's just coming up from past experience. Or potentially, it could be something that our parents' generation learned. Trauma is absolutely passed down from generation to generation. This is also being showcased in lots of new research studies as of the past 30, 40 years. Maybe just, the past 100 years of research has been full of new ideas that maybe won't even become mainstream for another 100 years or more. I like to always consider all possibilities, especially because I do think that our bodies have this innate intelligence that is God-given. We can tap into that technology, which is God, source, creator. We can pull from source. When we're co-creating with God, this is when things really get crazy and start to really flow. Vibes are real. The power of your voice. Playing an instrument is great. I love the guitar because I can feel the vibrations through the wood, and it's a very soothing, comforting sound. When I was learning to play, it wasn't very comfortable because it's just an awkward instrument. Your body is all lopsided. Your hands have to get strong. I love playing the piano now for that reason, because it just feels a lot easier. But our voice is an instrument and a tool that we have with us every single day. And that's what is incredible about being human, is that we have all of these tools that we might not even realize. If you want to learn more about Bij mantras or sound healing, sound music therapy, I can't wait to have guests on to help go deeper into these topics. And of course, I'll share more about my personal transformation with music, with these moments, as this podcast continues to unfold. Thank you so much for checking out the last few episodes. If you haven't already subscribed to this podcast, please do so. I really want to get the word out there, because especially when I have guests starting to come on, I think it's going to be a really helpful space. If you haven't already found value in this, thank you for hanging in there. Thanks for joining me every Monday for a new episode. If you're interested in learning about any upcoming events I'll be having soon, or even ways to hack your own productivity healing, music, wellness, you can check out my website at courtneymckenna.rocks/podcast. There you can go download my bullet journal, my daily devotion bullet journal, which hopefully will help you to get aligned with the thing that you're most wanting to create this year. If you have any questions on how you should use that, DM me or shoot me an email at courtney@musicismymantra.com, and I'll see you next week. Until then, I hope you go and live your best life, healthy, wealthy, and wise. Bye.